Hey, how's it going, everyone? This is Brendan Bias from checkit.com, and welcome to another Walkthrough Wednesday. I'm sorry that I really haven't been around releasing tutorials for the past couple of weeks or so. The reason being is that I've been homesick. I really don't know what it was. It was either the flu or a cold or like allergies or something. I don't know. All I really know is that I was coughing a lot and my voice was practically gone, which is, you know, really not that great for creating tutorials. So I decided to kick it back for a few weeks, and so my voice came back. So here I am, trying to get back into the groove with releasing tutorials and such. But I'm still sick, so if there's like random cuts in the video or anything like that, it's probably because I paused to cough a couple of times or something like that. It's really sad, but if you want to show your support for me, regardless of, you know, how I sound or whether I'm coughing, please give this video a like. I would really appreciate the support from you guys. It's been a rough couple of weeks for me. But anyway, getting into the tutorial itself, I don't remember how long ago this was, but someone had made a request for me to basically recreate a tutorial that someone else had done. And just to, you know, give credit where credit is due, this is the tutorial right here. It's by Jazzed Tutorials. It's this sparkling rainbow lighting glowing effect. Gosh, that's a mouthful. And it's not really a bad looking effect or anything like that. I guess the reason they wanted me to recreate it is because the tutorial itself is kind of, I don't know, kind of old, and I don't know, if you watched it, you'd kind of get the point. I don't want to say anything bad about this tutorial or anything like that. You'd have to watch it to see what I'm talking about here. So anyway, I didn't really want to simply recreate that tutorial word for word or anything like that. So I decided to put my own little bit of a spin on it, a little bit of flair, and this is what I ended up getting. It's a lot brighter and a lot more chaotic, and I don't know, I just think it looks a lot more interesting in my personal opinion. So why don't we just jump right into this? I'll keep this here for reference in case I want to grab a few settings that I used. There was actually quite a bit of randomness I just kind of added in as I went, but hopefully I don't really need to reference back. So let's just go ahead and start off by creating our new document. Let's name it Sparkling Rainbow Lighting Glowing Effects. Goodness, I still can't believe that tutorial was that popular with that kind of name. So anyway, I like my full 1080p resolution here, so I'm going to go with 1920 by 1080, and I'm going to make my background contents white. So let's hit OK. And I'll hit Control-0 to zoom into canvas size here. And the first thing I want to do is set up the background here. So I'm going to double click the background layer. I'll rename it to BG, hit OK, or the Enter key, depending on what you want to do there. And I'm going to go to Effects and add in a gradient overlay on top of that. And for the gradient overlay, let's change the style from linear to radial. I'm going to toggle the reverse, and I'm going to put the angle to 0 degrees. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and edit the gradient right now and change the white point to a sort of like lightish, grayish red sort of color, so somewhere up in there. We can go back and edit this as much as we want later, so it really doesn't matter too much. And so let's hit OK and hit OK again. And next up, I'm going to create a new layer, and let's just call this Clouds. And just in case, I'm going to reset my foreground and background color by hitting the letter D on my keyboard there. And I'm going to fill in this layer with black, which happens to be my foreground color, so I'll use a shortcut Alt backspace. That would be Option Delete if you're on a Mac. And so now let's go to Filter, let's go to Render, and throw in some clouds there. And let's set this sucker to Color Dodge. And just for the fun of it, let's duplicate the clouds layer and then go to Filter and click Clouds right there, or you can just use a shortcut Control F to repeat that last filter there. And I'm just going to put down the first set of clouds to, maybe about 50 some odd percent, and then put the second set of clouds down to around 70%. And I'll just kind of tweak these a little bit later on. And let's see, let's make a new layer once again. Let's fill that up with black. And let's go to filter, and let's add in some noise. For this, you can keep it pretty simple. I'm keeping the amount down to 20% with the distribution set to Gaussian and monochromatic check mark, so that way we don't have a whole bunch of weirdo like colors and stuff going on there. And we'll hit OK. And then we'll set that sucker to color dodge as well. And so just keep in mind, we can mess with the settings of these clouds as much as we want. We've got two separate sets of clouds, so that way they can like add on top of each other a little bit differently. And while I'm working on the background, let's go back to the gradient overlay over here. And let's edit this this first color here and maybe make it a little bit lighter of a color. It's getting a little bit bright there. Maybe we'll put it a little bit more that direction. Okay, that's not too bad. So we got this kind of murky reddish color going on. And another thing that I like to do is add in a second red slider, but this time I'm gonna bring down the color quite a bit, and maybe we'll make it a little bit grayish, so that way we get some of that desaturated set of red in the edge. But then when it gets more towards the middle, it's a little bit brighter. So let's just kind of mess with that a little bit more until we get something that looks pretty good. That's not half bad right there. So I've got 722020 on that first slider. And then the next one in is EF3535. So in my opinion, that's looking pretty good. And I will keep that just as it is. Whoops, I did not mean to move that gradient. Let me move it back and hit OK. There we go. Looking pretty sweet. So the next thing I want to do is bring in a picture that can, be masked on top of this background. So the one that I went ahead and grabbed was this really old picture that we took of me jumping like years and years ago, and I just figured it kind of fit with the theme here. And normally what I would do is just grab the masked version of this that I already made and drop it in. But I realize that there are some people out there that, I don't know, they get kind of upset when I leave things out. So I think I'll just go through this really quickly, the whole masking bit of this picture. So the way that you go about doing this is completely up to you. But something that I like to do is grab the quick selection tool just to get a general idea for the mask here, and I'll just click and drag along the body here. And if I end up giving you guys this picture, don't like dawdle on my underwear or anything like that. I know it's there, deal with it. Who gives a crap, right? Alright, so just going in and selecting all of the areas that I want to keep in the mask here, going down the leg and onto the foot. Now I do realize that there are people out there that don't like the quick selection tool, and I don't blame you. It's a fantastic tool, but it has its flaws. It's not a perfect tool to use. That's why once I'm done getting the general selection done for the person that I'm masking out, which I'll go ahead and check over real quick just to make sure that I've got all the general stuff taken care of here. Looks pretty good. It's missing the hair. Get that in there. Awesome. So I get the general idea of the mask down using the quick selection tool, but now I'm going to go ahead and swap over to my Polygonal Lasso tool to make some finer adjustments here. And I'm just going to do one or two things as a bit of an example, but for the most part, I think I'm just going to fast forward through this part. So for example, some of these shoelaces here are flying about, and the quick selection tool just doesn't get the point that I want these in here. So I'm going to add these to the selection by holding down the Shift key and just clicking to add points as I go around the edge of the shoelaces here. Now, I do want to point out that I just got a new mouse today. My other mouse crapped out just out of nowhere. It would do something to where if I were to try and click, it would double click instead. Or if I were to try and click and hold, it wouldn't click and hold. It would just do that randomly, like sometime after. I don't know. It was confusing, and so I decided to get a new mouse. And since I plan to do more gaming, I decided to get a gaming mouse. And holy crap, is this thing effing sensitive. Like, seriously. I'll get back to that in a moment. So I just finished getting the outer selection of the shoelaces down, and now I need to get rid of the inner portion of this where the blue sky is. So to get rid of that, I just hold down the Alt key or the Option key if you're on a Mac, and just really quickly select the portion that I don't want to include in my mask. And that's, you know, really nice and simple to get rid of there. Okie dokie, sounds fantastic. So anyway, this gaming mouse that I've got, it's I believe it's a Razer, and it's at like 5,600 DPI, which is I think the standard is like 300 DPI or maybe even less than that. But regardless, it's very, very sensitive, and it's gonna take me a little while to get used to it. All right, so. Anyway, I'm just going to go ahead and finish selecting all these areas that I want to keep as part of my mask. And yeah, let's just call that good. Peace. Alright, so I just went ahead and finished up the whole, you know, tuning up some of the edges here and there that I couldn't get with the quick selection tool, and now I'm ready to move on in the masking process. And so the next thing that I like to do is use the Refine Edge tool to fix things up with the mask here. Now you can do this however the heck you want, experiment as much as you like, but here's, you know, the kind of general thing that I like to do. I like to toggle the smart radius and put that up just a couple pixels there. And keep in mind that this will all change depending on the size of your picture, so just keep that in mind. And anyway, so another thing that I like to do is to put up the smooth edge just a little bit, so that way some of those harsh edges are smoothed out. And then I'll also put on just a tiny bit of feather. And the thing I put most of is the contrast and the shift edge. Now I like to put the shift edge down so that way it gets rid of some of those blue edges that you see along the edges there. And also to help with that, I like to turn on the Decontaminate Colors, and that will just kind of desaturate the edges a little bit, make them a little bit nicer to look at. So this is looking rather high quality, rather clean, and I think we are set with this mask. So I will output this to a new layer with the layer mask and hit OK. And I'll just go over to my move tool here and click and drag this sucker up to the tab and bring him on back down. And right now he's below the clouds layer, so let's put him on the very top. And I just remember that we need to rename that to noise. And let's rename this to jump while we're at it. And so now let's bring up the transform tool, which is Control T on a PC or Command T if you're on a Mac. And let's go ahead and scale this sucker down while holding Alt and Shift, or Option and Shift if you happen to be on a Mac. And let's get this sucker into a good spot, shall we? Let's do it more around 31%. And I'm going to tilt him off to the side a little bit so it actually looks like I'm like jumping up to something. And let's do maybe around right there. Holy crap, my phone. Shut up. I'm just going to toss this over there. All right. Now it won't distract me anymore. So anyway, I'm thinking this is a pretty decent spot, and I'll hit the little check mark up top to commit the transformation here. And something that you'll notice, if I were to go and I'll put in a black layer on the background just so you guys can see this a little bit better. When you transform this sucker, you'll see that there's a little bit of an edge left over, and I'm really not sure why this happens. I guess like whenever you transform something with a mask, it kind of leaves a tiny edge on it. So in order to fix this, what I'm going to do is select the layer mask for the jump layer, and I'm going to click it while holding the Alt key since I'm on a PC. That would be the Option key if you're on a Mac. And so now we can get a kind of an idea of what the mask looks like here. And so the easiest way that I know to fix this up is to grab the Polygonal Lasso tool. Let's make a selection around myself here. Oops, go back. Go back. Gosh dang it. Fine, I'll just reselect it then, since my freaking lasso tool is screwed up just right there. And so anyway, I made a selection around myself, and now I'm going to invert that selection by hitting Control-Shift-I or Command-Shift-I. Or you can go up to Select and click Inverse right there. And so now this should select all of the edges that have white around it. And since black is my foreground color, I can just fill this in by hitting Control Backspace or Command Delete if you're on a Mac. And then of course Control D or Command D to deselect that. And selecting the original thumbnail for the jump layer will get us out of the mask. So let's just delete that black layer so we can see what's going on. And now let's start messing with myself so that, I don't know, just so that way I'm kind of like faded a little bit. So I'm going to put the jump layer into a group by hitting Control or Command G. And let's just rename this to Jump Group. Keep it simple. And I'm going to add a layer mask to the jump group. I'm going to switch to my gradient tool by hitting the letter G on my keyboard. And for the gradient, let's have it be from white to black. So that's already set right there. And I'm also going to have this set to radial. So click that second icon right there. And now I'm just going to click from like the center of my torso down to my foot. And that should, you know, fade out my body all nice and pretty like that. So now let's kind of make this a little bit more interesting, all right? Let's go to the jump layer over here. And just so I can keep the layer mask as a backup, just in case I mess something up, I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to name this Mask Backup. And while holding the Alt key or Option key, depending on whether you're on a PC or a Mac, I'm going to click and drag the mask from Jump to Mask Backup. And so that basically just copies the mask over there, and we can just reference back to that if needed. So let's go to the mask of the jump layer. And let's go to our brush tool by hitting the letter B. And I'm going to right click on the document here to bring up the brush settings. And I'm going to click the little cog icon in the corner and go and click the dry media brushes. And for that, we'll just hit append. And if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, we've got a new set of brushes applied here. And the one that I'm going to be using is this sucker right here with a number 20 underneath it. It's called Heavy Smear Wax Crayon. We'll give that a click. Or actually, we'll give that a double click to select it. Let's switch our foreground color to black over here. And so if you've never messed with this particular brush before, let me just give you a quick little rundown of it. It's basically kind of like a scatter brush. So if you were to click and drag, it will just kind of randomly create that little edgy mask as you go through. And let me undo that. However, if you were to just just click once, you'll see that it just it does these random pixels here and there. So what you can do with this is get rid of certain portions of the body here, and depending on the size of the brush, it will affect a larger area. So if you want to just go through and mess with the edges a little bit, just size down your brush a lot and run it kind of close to the edge of yourself or whatever the heck it is that you're masking in here. And keep in mind that wherever you are clicking and dragging, this brush affects a certain radius outside of it. So keep that in mind when you're trying to get rid of edges and stuff, to keep your brush a couple pixels away from the edge, so that way you don't accidentally take out a larger portion than you were really planning to. So anyway, what I like to do is just kind of go through and go to an area, click a whole bunch of times, maybe drag a little bit to affect a larger portion here. And I just kind of go through and do this really randomly. There's really no specific art to this. It's completely random. So just go through, have some fun, and maybe you'll like the result. I will be back momentarily. Sweet. So I just really quickly went through and added in some random splotches to mostly my legs and my arm, keeping most of my my torso intact because I kind of want that to be a sort of center point for the effect here, and just kind of have the rest of me kind of disappearing. However, I might go in and kind of get rid of some of my finger there, just for the heck of it. So anyway, let's do something else to this layer. Let's go add in an outer glow. So let's click the effects icon at the bottom of the layers panel and click outer glow. And for this, let's set the color to white, and let's bump down the opacity to about 65%, and let's try a 15% noise for the time being. And I'm going to put the spread up to about, let's try 20 with the size of 80. And I forgot we need to change the blend mode here to color dodge. There you go. That just looks so much better. All right. So now let's hit OK. I'm pretty content with that. And let's duplicate the jump layer by hitting Control or Command J. I'm going to trash the effects icon there. So let's delete that, so that way this jump copy, which I will rename to, let's just call this blur. And let's put jump above blur. And with blur selected, let's go to filter, blur, and let's do a motion blur. For this, let's set the angle to 40 with a distance of about 150. And with that, let's hit OK. And another thing that I kind of like to do with this blur layer is to duplicate it again with Control J. And let's put this above the jump layer. And let's set the blend mode to screen. And then I'm going to switch to my move tool and just kind of move this up and to the right. And somewhere right around there looks pretty decent. And so that way it just gives it a little bit of a glow behind it, kind of like the streaks of light we'll be creating, just a little bit different, that's all. So anyway, I'm pretty content with how this is turning out, so let's close up the jump group, and let's go ahead and create the streaks of light that you saw in the preview here. So to do that, let's make a new layer below the clouds, and we'll call this, we'll just call this light. Who gives a crap what it's called, right? And let's fill this in with just some random color, Alt backspace or Option delete if you're on a Mac over there. And making sure that your foreground and background color are still the default black and white. Let's go to Filter, let's go to Render and click Fibers. And for this, I'll just keep the default values of 16 and 4 and just click Randomize a couple of times and hit OK. And of course, everything looks really blown out, but that's mostly because of the sets of clouds and noise. It's really not that big of a deal. With the light layer selected, let's go to Filter, Blur, and add in a motion blur. And for this, let's set the angle to 90. The distance, it's really not that big of a deal so long as the lines look like they're all meshed together like that. So maybe I'll just bump this down to like 100. You know what? Maybe we'll bump that down to even 90s just to see how that looks. Not too bad. So anyway, once you've got that at a setting that looks pretty decent to you, just hit OK. And for this, let's set the blend mode to color dodge. So that way we've got these incredible streaks of light going on here. And once again, let's bring up the transform tool with Control or Command T. And let's click and drag outside of the bounding box while holding Shift until it's at a 45-degree angle. And just because I can, let's go ahead and drag one of these corners out while holding the Alt key to extend it just a little bit. And I'll hit the check mark to confirm that transformation there. So obviously these lights are a little too prominent. So what I'm going to do is go grab the regular lasso tool over here. And I'm just going to make just some kind of fun shape for the light streaks to show up in. And now I'm going to add a layer mask for the lights, and it should be masked to that random FN selection that we just made. And what we can do now is by having the mask selected and having the Properties tab open, we can increase the feathers of this as much as we want. So I'll just put that up to a point that looks pretty decent. Let's just put it right about there. Looks pretty good to me. So that's 80.9 pixels, but of course you can do, whatever the heck you want. So with the light layer selected, let's add a gradient overlay on top of it because let's face it, straight up white is not fun. And let's set the blend mode of this sucker to multiply. And let's click on the gradient and select this little rainbowy color that fades to transparent on either side. We'll hit OK. As for the angle, you can do either 0 degrees or 180 degrees, whatever your fancy is. And of course, I need to get rid of a 0 there. And also, just because I want to see the other colors going on, I'm going to reduce the scale just a little bit. So that way I can see like the purple and the red, colors of that sort. And we'll hit OK. Now, I do want some of these colors to show up on me as well. So let's open up the jump group. And let's go to the jump layer and add that same gradient overlay. Except this time I'm going to set it to overlay. And let's select that gradient and set that to the 180 degrees. And scale it down just a little bit. Somewhere right there looks pretty good. And I'll also put the opacity down to somewhere around 40%. Just so that way there's a little bit of color there, but it's not overly prominent. So let's hit OK. And let's see, what else can we do? Let's go back and reference the other one just to get a little bit of an idea of what I can do here. It seems to me that the streaks of light are a little bit more prominent on this one than the other one. I'm trying to decide if I like that or not. So how about we go to the light layer and put down the fill just a little bit. You know what? I just realized that maybe the reason that these don't seem so bright is because of the clouds. So let's go back to the clouds and bring some of those suckers back. What do you say? Alright, that's looking pretty freaking sweet. However, there's this huge dark spot in the cloud. So let's go back, filter, render, and clouds. Let's try and get a spot in there that's looking better. We're almost there. Okay, so that's a little bit better in my opinion. It's not quite what I was looking for, but it's better. So, although I will put the opacity, or sorry, not the opacity, but the fill of the layer down just a touch. Now I'm getting nothing. Let's put this back up to, let's do 97%. All right. Who gives a crap? We're just kind of experimenting as we go now, huh? Okay, so I do want to add in a little bit of a glow around here just for the sake of adding a little bit more to the photo. So let's create a new layer, and I'll call this cheesy lens flare. And for this, all I'm going to do is go to my brush tool, right click, let's scroll up and click the very first icon here, and let's scale up the brush by hitting the right bracket key. And let's make sure our foreground color is white. And let's make this about yay big and add in a spotlight right there. And let's also duplicate this little lens flare. Hit Control T or Command T if you're on a Mac. And then let's stretch her out while holding the Alt key. And let's kind of thin her out just a little bit. That's looking not too shabby, but we'll work with it. And let's merge these two together by hitting Control E or Command E if you're on a Mac. And let's put this somewhere around right there. And I'm going to put the fill all the way down to 0 and add a color overlay. And I'm going to set this to, let's set this to Vivid Light. Oh, I know what. All right. Sorry, I forgot. Let's go back to that. Set this to Divide. That's what I was using earlier. Set that to Divide and put that all the way up. Yes, look at that. Now we can change this to that lightish blue color. I knew I was doing something wrong. Look at that. We got a cool freaking golden lens flare going on here. But just to add something else on top of it, let's add in another spotlight on a new layer. And once again, let's put the fill all the way down, but we'll put in a color overlay. And this time we'll do that lightish teal color right there. And let's set that to Divide, and that should give us this cool, really hot pink highlight. So let's go ahead and move this onto the same area, but I think I'm going to scale it up just a little bit so that way it's a little bit more intense. Man, look at that. Now we're getting somewhere. And let's just call this one Spotlight while we're at it. And one more thing that we can do just to kind of make things a little bit more interesting. Let's go back into the jump group, and I'm going to duplicate the jump layer, but this time around I'm going to fill in the mask on this with black by hitting Alt Backspace, and I'm going to put this below the original jump layer, and we'll just rename this to Pieces just because I can. And let's go back to that dry media brush that we were using earlier. And this time around, what I'm going to do is simply go in and add like just random streaks of whatever that I can add in. Oh, I'm like, what the heck is going on? Nothing's showing up. The reason being is that I didn't have the freaking mask selected. So let's try this again. Mask selected, white is my foreground color. We should be able to add in random little streaks of color in with our tool here. There we go. That looks so much better. So I'm going to kind of do like little zigzaggy fluid motions, just as if, how do I explain this? As if these pieces were like flying off of me. So that's kind of something that someone had suggested in our fan group, or the fan creations group. And I just kind of want to give this a try before, and I kind of like the result here. So I'm just going to go through, add in random bits here and there, and hopefully this should look pretty decent. Now, by doing this, something to keep in mind is that since we duplicated this from the original jump layer, all these pieces are going to have a little bit of glow to them. So if you don't want that to show up quite so much, we're going to have to go back into the glow here, and I'll turn off the gradient overlay, and I'll also drop the opacity of the outer glow to somewhere around maybe like 30%, or you can just turn it off completely. It's up to you. And anyway, you guys get the general idea of how you can go about creating this general effect here. Let's go ahead and go full screen to get the magnificence in. Alright, so there you go, guys. That is your recreation of the sparkling rainbow lighting glowing effects by Jazz Tutorials. Okay, so anyway, guys, I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Once again, if you could just show some support by giving this video a like, that would be awesome. Also, if you have any requests or any of the sort, feel free to send them to me here on YouTube or by leaving them in the comment section below. Regardless, hope you guys enjoyed the tutorial. You guys have a nice Wednesday. Peace!